There's no denying the importance of audio for gaming. Cues for enemy positions are critical to staying on top of the competition, and Turtle Beach's Recon Controller combines quick action buttons with deep audio customization to bring EQ control and superhuman hearing to any wired headset on Xbox Series X or S, Xbox One, or PC. And it's only $60. So let's dive in and take a closer look at the Turtle Beach Recon Controller. Thanks for watching 9 to 5 Toys. Be sure to like, subscribe, and enable notifications with the bell icon so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Hey everyone, Jordan here with 9 to 5 Toys, and we do have both of the controllers from Turtle Beach. The Recon Controller, we have it in white and black. Designed to match your Xbox Series X or S, the Turtle Beach Recon Controller is here to augment the standard Xbox controller and bring multiple EQ modes to any headset that's plugged into the 3.5mm headset port. At its core, it is a wired controller. There is a USB-C port up here, so you do have to have it wired in at all times when playing, but otherwise there are a lot of features to really like about this controller. Most notably, there is this kind of dashboard of buttons and lights near the top of the Turtle Beach Recon controller. From left to right for the buttons, we have the volume controls, a superhuman hearing toggle button, the mode button, select, mic mute, and then chat volume. Above those buttons are 4 different indicators of what mode is currently activated. Pressing the mode button will cycle through all these different modes, which are indicated with this little light up here. From left to right, they are mic monitoring, EQ, button mapping profile, and Pro Aim focus mode. And when any of these modes are active, pressing the select button will cycle through the different levels of that mode. For example, on EQ, pressing the select button will cycle through the different EQ modes, and the current level of the selected mode is signified by the 4 lights in that diamond shape in the middle. So that might be a little confusing at first, but once you actually sit down and play with these controls a little bit and cycling through the different modes and selecting the different levels of each mode, it all makes sense. And one really cool thing, right when you open up the box and in the manual, there is this nice little cheat sheet that tells you what all those different levels are. So it's really easy to find out, exactly what kind of tweaks you're making, what kind of changes you're making, and make sure you have the controller dialed in exactly how you want it. Continuing with the design of the controller, the grips provide a bit of texture, but it's nothing too aggressive. Turtle Beach calls these their ergonomic cooling grips with micro cooling channels. And while I didn't really notice them keeping my hands particularly dry, they do really feel great when playing. Compared to a standard Xbox Series X controller, the Turtle Beach Recon controller feels like it has just a little more width to it. These sides kind of feel like they kind of come out a little bit more, maybe a little bit higher. And so actually for me in my hands, it almost makes it a little bit easier to grip than the standard controller. So I kind of am a fan of that. Otherwise, the layout, is pretty much identical between the standard controller and the Recon controller. Triggers on the Turtle Beach Recon controller are also just a little bit different than the stock Series X. There is a pretty intense texture on both the bumpers and the triggers. The bumpers are a little softer and not as clicky as the stock controller. Trigger pulls seem to be about the same distance as the stock controller though. Turtle Beach also mentions that there are rumble motors which are active in the triggers, but I didn't really notice that being much more noticeable when playing Overwatch or Call of Duty Warzone. So I wouldn't really say that this was something that made it much more immersive or anything like that. Another notable feature here are the quick action buttons, as they call them, which are on the bottom of the controller. So these kinds of paddles are really common on the Xbox Elite controllers. There are also other third-party controllers like Scuff, and on the Turtle Beach Recon controller, these are mappable as well. To map a button to the quick action button, first navigate over to the controller mapping settings with the mode button, and then hit select to choose the different profile you want to map. Hold the select button for 2 seconds, push the quick action button that you want to map it to, and then the button that you want to map to it. And then hold select for 2 more seconds to save the setting. If you're used to an Elite controller where you have the 4 different paddles under here, then these 2 buttons might not feel very adequate, but if you are used to a stock controller, then adding some mappable quick action buttons on the bottom, does make gaming a little bit easier in my opinion. It took me a little bit of getting used to on the Elite controller, but now that I'm used to that, it's really hard to go back to a standard controller that doesn't have any buttons on the back. For me and my hands, the action buttons, the quick action buttons are at the perfect place for me to activate those really easily. So everything feels really natural with those, and they do have a nice, pretty satisfying click as well when you do press those. Apart from the additional buttons and features, the rest of the controller performs very similarly to a stock controller. Thumbsticks are snappy with a very familiar resistance. The face buttons also have a similar sound and feel. The D-pad is the only thing that feels a little bit different, as it isn't nearly as clicky as the stock Series X controller. Alright, so hands down, one of the most notable features here is going to be all of the EQ and sound controls across the top here. When you have a headset plugged in, the EQ option illuminates, so you can hit the mode button to cycle over to that EQ mode, and then hit select to cycle through all the different EQ modes on here. First up, there is a Turtle Beach signature sound, which is my favorite way to play if I'm not playing competitively. It's just a real natural, kind of even sound with some nice impactful lows, but also some clear highs. Next up, we have a bass boost mode, which does exactly what it says and boosts up the lows. For me personally, this is a little bit too much, but some people might enjoy that if they're looking for, a really impactful gaming experience. Toggling to the next one, we have a treble and bass boost. So just like the name would suggest, you're going to get more lows and more highs in here. So kind of that scooped out sound profile is going to take the mids down, but have a lot of lows and highs. And then lastly is a vocal boost mode, which also does exactly what it says and boosts the frequencies that are going to make vocals a little more audible. But that's not all. There is that dedicated SuperHuman hearing mode. So it has its own toggle on and off over here. And when you press that, it does negate any of the EQ tweaks you have enabled. But SuperHuman hearing mode is one of my favorite ways to play competitive shooters, like Warzone. So in addition to just tweaking EQ to make things a little more audible, it also kind of compresses that audio. So it brings up, footsteps and reloads and really game critical sounds. It makes those a little more audible. Now, if I'm not playing competitively, if I'm just playing, Forza or Microsoft Flight Simulator or something like that, I turn this off as I want a more natural sound. But when I am, looking for, picking up all those little audio cues and a little bit more of an enhanced sound for that, then SuperHuman hearing mode does that very well. And what's great about this, coming through the Recon controller is that you don't have to use a super expensive headset to get that. You can use, of course, Turtle Beach has their own Recon headset, which we reviewed and is a great, very simple headset by itself. But when you plug it into the controller and run it through that, then you also get, all those different EQ modes. You can get that SuperHuman hearing mode as well. So I think that's a great addition to a controller. You don't have to rely on a very expensive headset to have all those EQ tweaks, especially on Xbox. You can just, plug in a more budget-minded, very simple headset and get some really great EQ modes on there. So the last big notable feature on here is one that I really don't find myself using at all, and that's that Pro Aim Focus mode. So with that enabled, there are 4 different levels of it, and what that does is when you hold this one, the right little quick action button down here, it can step down the sensitivity of the right thumbstick. So if you want a little more accuracy, I guess, if you're sniping or something in a competitive shooter, you can hold that and it'll kind of bring down your sensitivity so you aren't making as big of movements. I play southpaw, so I'm aiming with my left stick and moving with my right stick. So for me personally, it doesn't make any sense to have that enabled because it just slows down my walk speed rather than my aiming, which is not something that I'm looking to do. It also, if you have that enabled and if you have a button mapped to here, like those will activate at the exact same time. So, if you do find yourself using that Pro Aim Focus mode, then you probably don't want a button mapped to this as well because you will activate, both of those at the same time. So definitely something to keep in mind there. So overall, just wrapping up here, thanks to the near stock feel and the added features, the Turtle Beach Recon controller is excellent. Compared to a stock controller, the only real downside I see is that this is a wired controller. But if you are playing more competitively, I would imagine that's not that big of a deal to you. And if you don't mind that cable and you really want to be able to make some audio tweaks, then this is definitely the controller for you. With this controller, you can use more budget-minded headsets and take them to the next level for competitive gaming. And at just $60, it seems like a heck of a deal to do that. Alright, and thank you so much for watching. That'll do it for our review of the Turtle Beach Recon Controller. Let us know what you think about it down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. This is Jordan with 9to5 Toys.